Well, as AI continues to grow in our lives, there are still many questions lingering around the role that governance can play. Wharton Professor Kevin Werbach is the chair of the Legal Studies and Business Ethics Department, and he joins us to discuss right now. Kevin, great to catch up with you. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Good to talk to you as well.
So we hear all of these things about the development of AI. It doesn't feel like we hear a lot about the governance side of this. What's happening in that realm right now?
I don't know. It depends who you're talking to. I hear a lot about the governance of it, and there's actually a great deal of talk going on in Washington and other capitals, and in the areas where people are developing AI about this. Broadly, what's going on is two sets of conversations, which I'm realizing increasingly have been conflated in a way that's not helpful. One is a longstanding set of conversations about risks of AI. What if the AI systems are biased? What about privacy issues? What about people who are potentially addicted or have mental health responses to AI companion apps? Those are what I think of as the deployment issues that are widespread and very significant. There's a separate set of conversations about the frontier AI models, about the labs like Anthropic and OpenAI, about potentially catastrophic risks of those frontier AI models, as well as geopolitical questions between the US and China.
So when you hear the term ethical AI, I think a lot of people would sit back and say, well, why isn't it ethical just kind of across the board? But you and I have talked about a variety of different topics in the past. And in many cases, you do find instances where the ethics do get pushed to the side at times.
Absolutely. A couple things. One is it's not the AI being ethical that in the first instance I think we should focus on. It's the humans being ethical and being responsible in how they design the AI and how they use the AI systems. Um, I think also it's important to distinguish there's AI ethics, which has been a field for a very long time, and there's a lot of excellent, very sophisticated work in different issues about ethical questions around AI. But then there's also what I prefer to call accountable AI. Sometimes people talk about responsible AI in other terms, but that's really focused on businesses and other organizations that are developing and deploying these AI systems. What should they do? And just as with the larger question of how should you be responsible in business, it's not a simple matter of just saying, well, identify some ethical principles. It's a question of broadly, how do you think about effectively operating a business
Right.
while responding to very legitimate public and ethical and other kinds of concerns about responsibility? And so that doesn't happen automatically with AI. It doesn't happen automatically anywhere else in business.
So when you talk about though the development of I think a lot of people would also expect that there has to be a global component to it. And you mentioned that obviously so many countries are focused on that. Uh, is there a recognition or is there a want, maybe is even a better way to ask it, to kind of keep the development of AI and how we use AI under one umbrella for all countries? Or is this similar to what we've seen with the use of the internet and GDPR in Europe? And they have one set of rules and we have one set of rules. How is that, do you think, going to play out?
AI is global. And so, as you point out, we need to think about AI governance globally. But that being said, there are proposals that keep getting thrown out. Well, what if we got all the governments of the world together and they enforce a treaty that would very much limit particular uses of AI? Most of that I don't think is realistic. There are some areas, again, of these catastrophic risks where just as the US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War collaborated on nuclear safety, the
Right.
US and China and other major governments where there is significant AI development will have reason to, and I think will find common ground on, for example, how do we ensure that an autonomous AI system will not launch a nuclear weapon?
Right.
These are broad questions, but what you're asking about is really a different set of issues, which is AI is a global phenomenon. It's being deployed by firms all over the world. And no one country can regulate all of that. That's true, but that's true about lots of things. And every major country is going to have to think about an AI framework within its own context. Those don't have to be identical.
Right.
But there do have to be certain baseline principles. And we need to think about what's an appropriate regime. I've been writing about this question, looking at different models in the US for what it would look like. I think in the US, we need to realize, first of all, there's a lot of background law that applies. If you discriminate with an AI system, you're discriminating under
Yeah.
existing anti discrimination laws. And also in the US, private liability is a big factor. There's thousands of lawsuits already against AI companies without even having a law passed in the US about AI. So there's much to be said about that. But ultimately, I think it's a fantasy to think there's going to be some global agreement that's going to be reached on all these issues.
So, is there, though, at least the recognition by the firms that are involved in the development of the AI, the Anthropics, the Open AIs of the world, that they have to have this as part of the build out as they move forward? And I ask that because we had the recent case with Hugging Face
Mhm.
that ended up obviously being basically a backdoor hack.
That was really a seminal moment when OpenAI announced that one of its pre-deployment models had autonomously, in testing, gone out and hacked into Hugging Face. Because that's a scenario that people had talked about for a while. That clearly is a scenario that is scary and problematic.
Yeah,
But it was seen as a hypothetical. Now it's real, and AI is only going to get more powerful. In that case, OpenAI did announce what happened. They are doing an investigation. They are pausing and limiting some of the development of their next generation models, and so are many of the other AI companies. To your question, the major frontier AI labs in the U.S. Have from the beginning had a commitment to addressing at least the catastrophic risks of AI development.
right,
But there's always a tension because they're in a race to develop as fast as they can against each other and against these companies in China. No company wants to make something that is going to cause massive harm, even in their own self-interest. You don't
right.
want to have that. But exactly what it means and what are the mechanisms in this kind of challenging game theory environment that would effectively limit the risk of AI, those are the hard questions. For example, just to throw in one thing, my colleague Peter Conti Brown and I have written about using the model that we use for regulating banks. Banks are similar in that if there's a run on one bank, it can cascade and actually cause a global financial collapse. And so we have a whole regime of bank supervision that provides a flexible expert mechanism for dealing with those issues. We propose doing something similar for AI, but that's just one proposal.
Yeah.
I think companies, their hearts are in the right place, but that alone is not enough.
Well, and also I think we also have to look at it from the perspective of the public in general. Is also that we think of AI as a tool to be able to help us out, find information, and be
Mhm,
able to support the work that we're doing. I think a lot of people believe that's the path
mhm.
that is going to be most used by the public as we move forward. The question is, are the companies involved of the belief that that's the best path, or do they have grander views of what AI should be as we move forward?
And there's not one answer to that. When you look at a company, I might ask, what does Sam Altman think as the CEO of OpenAI? And even just
Yeah,
asking what Sam thinks is not an obvious question. We can say, what did Sam say? But part of what he says is not necessarily what's in his heart of hearts.
yeah,
He's one person, though. What Sam says in his public statements is not an answer to what does OpenAI, the institution, think. It's complicated. I will say it again, if we're talking about the major US-based frontier AI labs, all of them have many people at the very senior levels who I truly believe are very seriously concerned about risks of AI.
right.
And in fact, again, that is the ethos of how many of these companies, including Google, DeepMind, Anthropic, and OpenAI, got founded. But that alone does not mean, okay, there's not going to be any problems. First of all, there's a lot of debate about what risks we should focus on. And there's this question of, if you do think that a super intelligent AI could cause catastrophic harm, is the right strategy for you to say, let's not build it until we're really, really confident, because someone else is going to build it.
Right.
And we don't trust them as much as we trust us. That's the game theory tension that has been there all along with these companies. So, yeah, yes, I do believe, and I've engaged with many people in these organizations. They do appreciate that these are technologies that have many downside risks, and things need to be done to address that. But it's that alone is not enough, and this is the classic messy political process, and it's the
Yeah.
process where, unfortunately, the U.S. government has not been terribly helpful, because it's careened from saying just let them do whatever they want because we need that renovation, to, oh my God, we're scared about cyber risk, and so we need to shut down some of these models under some system where we're not even going to disclose what the rules are. We need adults in the room from governments that are helping this process with industry.
Kevin, always great to catch up with you. Thanks for your time and your insight. All the best.
Thanks very much, Dan.
Kevin Werbach, who is professor in the Department of Legal Studies and Business Ethics. He's also chair of that department here at the Wharton School.